Hello everyone and welcome to the extras of 7/7 The Big Picture. I'm Keelan Balderson, and before we start I just want to give a big thank you to you guys for sitting through the documentary. It was about 4.5 hours long, which is a lot longer than most mainstream documentaries. But I just want to thank you for spreading the links, telling your friends and family. You know, it's popping up all over the internet now. And it was a one-man operation created entirely on my home PC. There was no Hollywood or mainstream media budget. It was just me working away in a tiny little office for months on end. So I truly appreciate the positive feedback. I think the fundamental thing I'd like to get across to people that watch the documentary is don't believe what I say. Don't believe what I say. Go out and research it for yourself, because in researching for the film I come to the realization that you don't truly understand or know about a subject until you've actually researched it yourself, until you've taken several months out of your life and studied something hardcore, because there are so many sides and so many different intricacies to everything that we're told about in the world that you can't simply take what the mainstream media tells you as fact. You can't take what I say as fact. You need to sit down and interact with the information before coming to your own conclusion. Some of you may have felt overwhelmed or confused after watching the film. That's because I didn't wrap everything up in a pretty little bow like the BBC. The fact is, the war on terror and the agendas of our leaders are overwhelming and are confusing. The mainstream media doesn't always lie. It's that the truth gets lost somewhere in the shuffle. So when a government comes out with an official narrative, it gets repeated over and over again ad nauseum until it becomes gospel, and all other information is simply forgotten. The problem is we don't have any investigative journalists anymore that can go through these official narratives with a critical eye. It's now become the public's job to be the investigative journalists. If you want the truth, it's up to you to go and find it. As I said, I don't have a Hollywood budget. All of the footage for the movie came from online sources. A lot of it is mainstream news footage and some is taken from other documentaries. I'd like to acknowledge the following footage with reference to who was featured in the footage and or the creator of the footage. Charlie Veitch, US Embassy footage. BBC Conspiracy Files. Press TV 7/7 Debate. 7/7 Ripple Effect by John Hill. 7/7 Mind the Gap by David Shaler. 7/7 Ludicrous Diversion. The recent 7/7 Seeds of Deconstruction documentary by Tom Secker. Edge Media TV. Alex Jones of Infowars.com. Nafis Ahmed, author of The London Bombings, an Independent Inquiry. Nick Colostrom, author of Terror on the Tube. The Power of Nightmares by Adam Curtis. Al-Qaeda Doesn't Exist by James Corbett. John Ronson. The Ring of Power documentary. The UN Deception. The Mike Malloy Show. The Outfoxed documentary. Conspiracy Against the Republic. The Mossadegh documentary by Stephen Kinzer. Our Own Private Bin Laden documentary. We Are Change Birmingham Anjem Chowdhury footage. We Are Change UK Peter Power footage. The Zeitgeist movie. The 9/11 Truth Movement. Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Nuo Viso Movies Annie Michon footage. The Bank Job documentary. Tony Gosling. The Legacy of William Cooper. Videojug.com Pearl Harbor interview. David Ray Griffin and Michael Meacher. While reading the comments on YouTube and talking to a few of you on message boards, there were several common questions that came up, and in this extra I'll try and answer those questions. There's a lot of information now out there for when you make your own investigation into 7/7. Obviously there's a lot online, lots of different newspaper articles you can go through. My advice would be to look at all sides, read the establishment books and accounts. Obviously start with the official narratives and documents that you can find on the government websites. The first book I read on 7/7 was The London Bombings, an Independent Inquiry by Nafis Ahmed, who is featured in the documentary quite a lot. He essentially takes the same approach as I did, although because it was one of the first books that was published, there is a lot more information now in the public record, especially about Operation Crevice and some other things. But it's a great book to read to get you started, and it's not conspiratorial at all. It's straight up information, which I think's a good way to approach this. Another good book is What Went Wrong by Crispin Black, which is quoted in the film as well. If you want to know more about the inner workings of the intelligence agencies, that's a good book. And then you get, the more establishment books looking at the Iraq War and how that might have played a role on the alleged bombers. As far as documentaries go, I definitely recommend a new one called 7/7 Seeds of Deconstruction. That was by a guy named Tom Secker. It came out about a month after the first parts of mine were uploaded, and we appear to have set out with the same goal more or less, although he has a different historical context than 7/7 The Big Picture. I have been in touch with Tom, and I'd like to publicly thank him for finding some of the news footage which I used later on in the film. We don't agree on a lot of the historical points, but I think if you watch both films together you'll get more of an understanding of the wider context than if you watched either of them on their own. James Corbett of thecorbettreport.com was a huge inspiration for the Soviet-Afghan War part of the film, with his great documentary Al-Qaeda Doesn't Exist. And also The Power of Nightmares by Adam Curtis is a very good documentary on Al-Qaeda and some of the reasons why our governments overhype the war on terror. For the day of 7/7 itself, the fundamental website you need to check out is july7th.co.uk, which is the July 7th Truth Campaign website, and it's basically just a database, a whole encyclopedia of anomalies and important questions and archival news links. They've all been very helpful in proofreading the film and pointing out oversights. They helped me get a lot of the CCTV footage, so a big thanks to them, and definitely check out that website when you start your own investigation into 7/7. It's important to understand that although Al-Qaeda isn't an organised network or army, and it pretty much grew out of a database name, the government and media have adopted it as a word that basically means Islamic terrorism. So when I refer to Al-Qaeda in later parts of the film, I don't mean this organised boogeyman Al-Qaeda with sleeper cells all over the world. I just mean it in reference to some kind of Islamic terrorism, not necessarily part of a wider network. A better word would simply be terrorists or jihadists or, radical Islamists. This would take away the idea of an organised power structure with bin Laden at the top. Al-Qaeda inspired terrorism, I believe, is somewhat of a threat, but it's a mode of operation, a jihadi ideology, not people that work directly with bin Laden in some worldwide sleeper cell. It's young kids being brainwashed in Britain by people like Anjem Choudary, who has never met bin Laden. So in the film, I've used it when quoting the media in their context, and a few times just to mean Islamic style terrorism without this worldwide sleeper cell, bin Laden runs everything overtone. The media often never define the word and basically play off people's ignorance to drum up fear. They use it both ways to mean Islamic terrorism and the boogeyman tabloid version of Al-Qaeda, the fake one. Well, first off, I'll say I don't dislike John Hill or David Shayler. I think both of their films were very important films. They got a lot of people questioning the official story of 7/7 long before I was even questioning the official story of 7/7. I'm not actually one of the people that think David Shayler has gone crazy. I know a lot of people think they got to him and things like that, but I've listened to some of his stuff on YouTube. I think he makes a lot of sense. He's got a very new age philosophy, and I like a lot of this questioning the world type stuff. I think a good interview to understand Shayler's current mindset was the one he did with Charlie Veitch. It's not as simple as him coming out saying he's the Messiah, and I respect his right to do and say what he wants in peace. I mean, the guy was working for the intelligence agencies. He was bogged down in the system. When you get out of that kind of mindset and realise the world you're living in is pretty much a lie, and he becomes aware of all this false flag terrorism and he starts to tell the truth, he's going to go a little bit posse. He's going to go a little bit the other edge of the sword. And now I think he's living in an eco-village, doing that whole thing. So I respect him and his right to do that. The point I was making is that with something factual and important like 7/7, the media are always looking for ways to discredit what you say. So if you suddenly come out wearing a dress and to the average person seem like you've gone completely mad, then the information you presented is just going to be dismissed. Now personally, I don't subscribe to that mindset where you shoot the messenger. If the information's solid, then the information's solid. I have nothing personally against John Hill or David Shayler, but my point is the media and the establishment will easily discredit them for that, and I'm saying I'm not the Messiah. I'm just a very naughty boy.